Really happy to have on the podcast today Dana Denis-Smith, who is the CEO of Obelisk and the founder of the first 100 Years campaign. Welcome to you, Dana.
I'm very delighted to be here.
I'm really excited to have an opportunity to speak to a fellow former lawyer, legal tech founder. And just tell us first about Obelisk. What made you found this organization?
Although you do know that once a lawyer, always a lawyer, right? Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes.
Well, to be honest, something to be an entrepreneur. When I became a solicitor, I thought that would be, the only way was up. But there was always a way out too, as we all know. So I decided to go into starting a business, and this is my second business. And I had this light bulb moment when I heard that a lot of the legal industry was outsourcing work to lower cost jurisdictions. And I had this kind of moment of coming up with the idea of outsourcing to people's homes. In particularly, I was interested in creating opportunities that were flexible and remote for moms who were leaving the profession. Clients seem to have no end of work piles to get through, and I thought it would be a perfect match to get the women back into work, the clients to get their work done more flexibly, and we would sit in the middle and be this kind of magic maker, really, as a business. So that was really what got me back into the legal profession, having left for a few years after qualifying.
It's so interesting, the kind of parent side to this. I mean, having come from a large, fast-paced law firm, it's a very challenging environment to do both. And so you have so much talent who's kind of leaving the profession but able to do great work. So congratulations on the founding and what sounds like a really successful journey.
Well, a tough one, to be honest, not least because, as you know, when you start, you have all your assumptions that need to be tested in the market. And so I didn't actually have a child when I started the business. I just saw this external objective problem. And like any kind of marketplace, I thought there's got a way to, meet supply and demand and balance it somehow. Obviously, it was the age of the platform economy as well, so it was very much kind of its age, I guess, matching talent to opportunities. I guess for me, it was more that I had picked up the trend, but I not from my own experience, just kind of sense of the longer you stayed, the fewer women you saw, and definitely fewer parents you saw, or parents that were willing to say they had children. There were probably lots of hidden children that we never knew about, but this kind of openness around family life, work-life balance, wanting to work differently, and actually working from home, which seems now like a funny idea, but then in 2010 when I started, that was probably one of the biggest obstacles to the business. Was, what do you mean you're sending work to people's home? I had a whole range of objections around why it wouldn't work, confidentiality and all these other things. And at the end of the day, for me, it was very simple. We had an incredible amount of people with a lot of skills and, highly educated, that were willing to work in a different way, but they needed to also learn how to do it and juggle it around families. So for me, it was a no-brainer, but it did take a bit of time for people to catch up with me, I guess.
It's so interesting. I mean, we lawyers are great at finding all of the reasons something won't work, right? But it has worked. And one of the things I've thought about a lot is, but going from being a lawyer to being an entrepreneur, used to be seen as a kind of crazy thing because, we lawyers are very detail orientated and risk averse and all these sort of things that don't seem to match with entrepreneurship. But what was your experience, and kind of what did you need to shift in your mindset to be successful, and what actually helped you along the way?
To be honest, the biggest driver has always been, and I think it's linked to my upbringing and my childhood in communism, a sense of I needed to be free. And having experienced big law and the kind of environment that I'm sure you've experienced as well, I didn't have that sense of freedom. I'm an ideas person, and I think plenty of lawyers probably are, but I didn't know I was an ideas person with also a sense of action. That was a discovery for me as well. I never dreamt of being an entrepreneur, but neither did I dream of being a lawyer, to be honest. And I think that kind of drive that I had around being free and being creative and allowing my ideas and growing them and incubating beyond just my head and actually externalizing that helpful to be a lawyer in setting up a company and knowing how to do it. And that was probably the fastest thing I did, just setting up my articles and of association and all that stuff. But I think this kind of curiosity, mental curiosity, actually is transferable. And that's what I had from before becoming a lawyer. I'm a latecomer to law, having been a journalist. But the biggest driver for me was that kind of independence, which is another quality of lawyers. A lot of lawyers are quite independent minded. And my kind of sense of maintaining that, being quite clear in my head, I wanted my ideas to kind of grow and be seen. And so I think there are a lot of things, but in that environment, when I trained and I was kind of entering it, it felt very counter my personality in a way, and I wanted to fit in. I really was trying very hard to be very well behaved and the best person possible. And it wasn't about ability, it was about personality and a sense of freedom and excitement outside, which is not compatible with a big culture that you are having to be molded by. So I guess, yeah, freedom is the biggest word.
And one of the things I've learned on this podcast, there's so many lawyers who are kind of sitting in these big firms who are highly curious, creative, intelligent people, first principles thinkers, and so on. And there's so much talent that can be applied, of course, in law, but in other areas. So really, really kind of refreshing to hear your take on this. One of the things that I really wanted to ask you about was the first 100 Years campaign. This is something which has been really, really impactful on the industry. But just tell us a little bit about what is that and how did it come about?
Well, to be honest, again, it came about through that kind of sense of entrepreneurship, I think, because once you are an entrepreneur and you make peace with the fact that you're a constant kind of searcher for, gaps, basically. That's what we see, and then we build something to fill the gap. And I guess for me, the first 100 years came from a gap, but actually it started with a photograph from Herbert Smith, and the partnership had just the one woman partner in the early 1980s. And it somehow crystallized again a kind of, thoughts that you exit or you kind of pick up, but you don't really know, you can't really place them. And the thought was, where were the women? I could see it was visible, but I didn't really know what to make of it. I didn't really understand which context to put it in. And I think this photograph just kind of suddenly gave me a very immediate, a little bit like, with the business idea when it kind of just hits you, right? Where you have that kind of light bulb moment. It just crystallized to me this woman problem as being something that maybe is more recent than we realized, something that maybe we can still capture through the generation that's still around, that pioneering generation. And so I basically, starting from that photograph, I then discovered that women were barred from being lawyers until 1919, and the law had to be changed by Parliament. And this was around this time in 2013 that I kind of picked up this photograph and discovered the story of the act. And then I decided to launch a 5-year project in 2014 because I had to give myself 5 years to build up to the centenary in 2019, knowing by this time I did have a child and a new business, and you know how it is when you start and it's all very hard, and I didn't want to kind of rush myself and leave it to the last moment, maybe being very loyally, right? Not to the last minute. I did not run up against the deadline of 2019. So I thought we can build up this movement over 5 years. It gives me enough time around everything else that I was doing to research the history, find out about the women, create the timeline, and make a sense of where are we, in that kind of historic timeline. And then create the connections in the industry to make it a very exciting year. So for me, it was a really important thing to have a kind of 2019 to be a festival of celebrating everything that women have achieved. But we didn't really know who the women were. So I had to kind of, bring the dead ones to life, film everybody that was a pioneer and was still around, and then launch all of these beautiful things into the world. So I kind of wanted to pace myself, knowing that it can be quite difficult to deliver. But I just wanted to leave a more coherent historic context for women to know how they ended up being where they are. And before I knew it, it snowballed to something that, in a way, I did dream. I wanted it to be this kind of festival where everybody had a party and I didn't have to play my own part in every party. but it's definitely gone way beyond my wildest dreams in terms of size, reach, types of things that we've created, and if you like, the reshaping, the kind of arrival of women that we've put at the center of the legal landscape.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think it's only 100 years since it was even legal. But as you said, in the 1980s, there were still massive problems, and there are still massive problems today. So, there's been progress, but there's still so much to do. I mean, from your perspective, what are the big challenges of today, and what do you see in the legal profession? Is there real progress happening, or is there much more that we need to do?
To be honest, I think the structure has remained really quite unchanged, and that's probably posing a lot of challenges for every new entrant, not just women, but they happen now to be the majority, and they have to operate within a structure that is alien to them, and they didn't really play a part in creating it. Then we've had a whole transformation around technology, alternative providers like my business. So there's been a real shift and transformation in what is the legal sector. And to us who operate at the other end, we feel it's exciting, it's changed, it must be changing. But actually, a lot of the kind of system that underpins it is very, very traditional, very stubbornly so. So that means it creates this disconnect between the kind of newer, whether the newer ecosystem as is trying to kind of take over the older ecosystem. And there's a kind of bit of a friction developing. And I think that's affecting women. That's why women don't climb to the very top. They're not really equally kind of gaining from all the change, if you like. We still have inflexible arrangements that really do affect parents. They are still thinking, can I stay? Do I need to be quitting my job if I have a family? That should be a question we shouldn't have to ask in 2024. You have then, a new generation of more diverse entrants, but they have less certainty around where they headed in their career. So I think there's so many shifts, but there's two kind of things, systems kind of overlapping, and they're not yet in any kind of sense of harmony, really. And I think we therefore have a lot of challenges that will be still with us, I think, for the decades ahead, sadly.
And you mentioned an Obelisk. I mean, it's amazing to think just a few years ago that people were still thinking that working from home is kind of an insanity, just like never happen. Now it's become, partially normalized. But do you still face challenges in persuading folks of that new, more flexible way of operating, or is everything like a little bit better today?
Well, I think it is better, to be honest. I mean, it's not comparative. I mean, 2010 was such a kind of massive change from a working practice point of view. There are still constituencies that are affected by these new ways of working, and definitely disabled lawyers are being left behind because that mobility is a problem. It's about the clients you choose to have, and I guess that's why we became a B corporation, right? Because we wanted to be very clear around our value system. So clients who are 100% inflexible, they want somebody 5 days in the office, they must know that part of that demand, there's a culture of, locking some people out. So if we're not able to have a transparent and open discussion around what is it that is required, that requires this level of flexibility, then maybe we're not a good match from a kind of client supplier point of view. So we quite courageous, I guess, in having conversations that at times might feel a little bit testy, but I think it's the only way we can progress culture. Otherwise, everything will stay the same. And we do owe it to our returners, to our disabled lawyers, to all the workers who are being left behind by other structural inflexibilities to really champion them. And returners have always been our passion, to be honest. And it's definitely one of the stickiest, biggest problems that we still have around opening the profession to women and men who take a longer career break and want to return. So you just have to be open and challenge status quo, I guess, which entrepreneurs are good at.
It's something which we're seeing a lot at the moment. The big return to the office. I think Amazon is now going down this route, and I think a bit like Obelisk, we are a very flexible remote working company at Juro, where you don't have to be in the office any days a week if you don't want to, and some people are there 5 days and some people are there 0. But actually, like, what do you make of this trend back? Because everyone says, somehow, you can't have culture without everyone being in the same room, and we've never kind of believed that. But just kind of curious how you perceive this return to the office.
From a management point of view, I completely get it. I mean, it's an easier thing to manage people down the corridor. And um, so if you don't want to evolve your middle management, then you will just demand that everybody comes back because it's applying old style management to thinking. I disagree with it fundamentally. I mean, I always did. I think the biggest loss of not being in the office part of the time is the sense of friendship, and especially for the entrance, the peer network you create. I mean, most of my friends, if I look back, including my law firm and through all my jobs, I made friends among the people that I started with and I worked with, and you need to carry these people for life. You pick up these friendships through your jobs, and I think to me that I find it extraordinary that nobody's making that very obvious point of you coming not because you need to be managed down and because you're gonna learn up, but you're actually making friends at your level, and they will sustain you through your career, and that is the value of being in the office more to create that sense of camaraderie and being in it together and having common experiences. I think very much the conversations around management styles and leadership and culture. I don't buy the idea that a corporate culture is only built in the office. I don't. I think people have very short memories about some really bad times in the office, around very bad coffee machines. So the idea that somehow you get best ideas by being together, I disagree. I think yes, they can evolve when you are together. You can test things more, but you can still do it. We do it. I mean, we're fully remote, but the team gets together. We have meaningful days together when we achieve stuff, and it's I don't know. I think it's a kind of way of clinging to old ways and not evolving your managers to new ways. But I think the generation coming behind will be different managers anyway. I think because they are coming with a very digital first idea. They have
Yeah.
different expectations of the workplace. So I'm hopeful that it will be temporary as the generation shift, the leadership positions, and then maybe we move on.
I hope so. And thinking about that new generation coming in, one of the things we hear a lot about is, the purpose side culture. So not the like, what are the events and the artifacts we have where we feel culture, but actually like, why do people come to work? Why are people choosing this profession? I'm just kind of curious if you're observing whether with the folks at Obelisk or elsewhere, just a different reason for being and more kind of purpose-led professional work.
Well, I think we've always had two types of people, to be honest. The ones that came for financial, very clear in their head around, I've got a lot of debt. I want to be a city lawyer because I want to be rich, and I would say they've always been the minority, very directed, very driven, but not most of the lawyers or future lawyers that I was encountering. Most people come with great ideals, with a sense of seeing the underserved, seeing the ones that can't speak for themselves, and adding their power to them and making that difference. I think you know most people want to get out of work some kind of sense of dignity, of adding value and being good to other people, and I think law is therefore a really good conduit for that kind of desire. I'm not saying, I mean, we've seen the junior lawyers that we spoke to, they're more ethical, they're really interested in who the clients are, they want to stay true to their value system. Now that conflicts with the idea of being a lawyer and being equidistant, and being able to address a problem even when you don't believe in, you've got to represent, everybody's got a right to be represented. So I think it's work in progress, but I'm quite a return to basic principles around being a lawyer. What is a lawyer? They're great questions, and I think we need to ask more of them. So I think it's good, it's coming to the foreground, but I think there's always been a kind of sense of serving people that can't do it for themselves, and I think probably that's why I ended up in the profession.
And there's so many different forces at play, and things are moving so quickly in the modern world. But of course, the biggest trend and theme we're seeing in legal services, the use of AI to automate repetitive legal tasks. Just curious whether you're incorporating that in your business, what you're seeing your clients using, and what your general observations are on AI.
I think it's a very exciting time to be in law, not least because it's so difficult to sell change and new stuff into legal. It's a very difficult market, I think, in which we operate in terms of setting something up and actually making it successful. AI seems to be, maybe because it's a word first kind of solution, Gen AI in particular, seems to have really resonated with lawyers. And I think that's really exciting because that means we are going through an adoption kind of wave that might be actually quicker. So in our platform, we've always had, some kind of level of machine learning because we do a lot of matching between lawyers and jobs and things. So you need to kind of be able to go relatively quickly through everything you have. Gen AI, we haven't yet rolled anything internally for ourselves, but we all use it. So, in fact, my biggest triumph today was that my daughter was preparing for something for school, and she said, "I asked Perplexity," and I was so excited. I'd left it on her mobile phone on purpose to see whether it will resonate. She's only 13, but I was thinking, what do they think? Because we are, the kind of generation that set the particular structure up, but are they going to think what we think they're going to think? So that was very exciting that she
that's very cool.
did. Yeah, so it worked. My lingering the app on the app, on her phone, it has delivered the level of.
It's kind of like a nudge. You've nudged her towards it.
Yeah.
But law firms as well. I mean, it's interesting. Like law firms are often quite hierarchical. So when we think about technology, often the starting assumption is top down. We're going to buy this firm-wide tool, and therefore everyone's going to use it. But actually, in AI, you often see the opposite, which is bottoms up. Folks are starting to use ChatGPT and asking their boss whether they can buy a tool. And actually, this is a much better way, right, to get real adoption.
But I think when you look at all the stages of legal adoption in tech, I mean, even dictaphones, okay? Partners were the last to adopt them, email. I mean, I remember when I was training, there were partners that were announcing with great pride that they will never touch an email and only the EA will write their emails. And it's not their thing, And so in every stage of technology, when people are moving on to Skype, some people are just learning to use the phone. I mean, it was a bit like that, And so I think with AI and Gen AI in particular, and because of these tools are so easy to use and so intuitive, and because they're word-based, I think lawyers have actually understood them more because there's no funny code appearing, strange colors with green and red or whatever. It's actually just plain words. You can say something and it says something back. And I think it appeals to that kind of words, kind of rich culture in the legal profession. The impact it will have on the work we do, obviously, we don't know yet. We know it's going to automate, it will simplify. That's a good thing. I mean, I've never seen a stage of technology development or some kind of major shift that has not resulted in, I mean, even the biggest crisis, financially speaking, or Lehman Brothers, they've all produced more work. Because at the end of the day, all of this work needs to be checked. And, somebody has to think through the flowcharts into how you're going to build something, how will you customize it, what makes it a particular brand delivery as opposed to your. So I think I don't know. I mean, obviously, some people say, "Oh, is this the death of lawyers?" I mean, I think it's just because everybody's wishful thinking. They're like, "Oh, these lawyers, they're expensive." Yes, if it reduces the cost, if it reduces the time, and actually, if lawyers end up having a life, why not? I think it's exciting, and I think it's to be embraced. I mean, I love it, to be honest. I use as many tools as I can to test them, and we're doing that testing to see what is the most powerful thing we can bring in. But I don't think lawyers are going to die as a result of AI.
It's a really interesting point about generative AI being all about words, right? And I have a similar hypothesis, which is as lawyers, we actually should be great at knowing what the question is, i.e., kind of crafting accurate prompts. We're also great at revision, checking stuff. I mean, I think anyone who's grown up in a law firm will have checked things again and again and again. So I sort of have this hypothesis we can actually be great at this stuff, and we certainly see our our customers experimenting with prompts in Juro that are increasingly sophisticated. Not just draft me an NDA, but summarize this in 2 languages and put it in a 2-column format, or summarize this document and draft an email to my CFO that I can explain the key risks with. These sort of things, actually, you start to unlock quite a lot of creativity, which folks often sort of assume doesn't exist in legal. And actually, our experience is it increasingly does.
And it plays to human strength. That's the thing for me, because it's very, you can, because it's relatively new, a lot of the focus of is the artificial intelligence. Actually, without the human input, you get substandard responses, right? So actually being able to have, as you say, that kind of sense of cross-examination that you learn if you're a lawyer, being able to really know, to be very precise about how you want things to be presented. I think it plays into our strengths. So I think it's a bright future.
Dana, you've done so much across Obelisk and First 100 Years campaign and other things. What are you hopeful for in the next 10 years of the legal profession?
Question. I guess it's, I like, when the kind of this alien ship that I was talking about, the newer ecosystem, I like it to land over the old one, kind of for them to merge in a positive way, where we really do have a more integrated profession where, let's say us, the kind of, newer entrants, because we're still new, although we are, I feel, quite established, are just seen as part of a landscape that services the consumer in the widest possible way, because choice is good, freedom is good, freedom of choice is great. I still think there's a bit of a kind of, them versus us, which is not helpful. So I like us to be more integrated. I mean, obviously we're having conversations, but more traditional law firms to feel they can be more collaborative. It's not a zero-sum game, because at the end of the day, we are underserving consumers and businesses. So more aligned, I think, will be more successful, and we will create that longevity. But we will, the imprint will land quite on the footprint. But I'm hopeful.
A very positive message, and one that is carefully considered, as we would expect us lawyers to do. Dana, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Where can our listeners find out more about you and your work?
So I'm very easily foundable on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, Dana Denis-Smith, or obviously Obelisk Support, obelisksupport.com. And also the charity First 100 with numbers, years.org.uk. Anywhere really, or just search me on Google.
Dana Denis-Smith, thank you so much for being on Brief Encounters.
It's a pleasure.